All right, everyone. Thanks for attending. The procedure for tonight's webinar follows. I'm going to introduce you to the webinar platform and how to interact with the webinar. Some of you will have received that information and read that. I'm going to introduce you to the MLA More Beef from Pastures program. Then I'm going to deliver the presentation, which will introduce you to 4 tools that I believe will add value to your decision making in beef enterprises. The webinar will run for approximately 30 minutes, after which we'll open it up for questions. Now, I've muted all of you. The only capacity you have to interact with me is to send me messages on the questions tab. So if people could just let me know that they can hear them by typing into those question tab, and I'll have the confidence that you can hear me. Do you mind typing into that question tab? Just say I can hear you loud and clear if you can hear. Terrific. Okay, I'm getting the message that everyone's hearing me. Thank you. Look, I've got some hay cutting going in the background, so I apologise if there's a bit of background noise. That's what it is. We're at that time of the year, and so I've got those responses. Everyone can hear me loud and clear. Thanks very much. We'll aim to finish on time tonight, and but beyond when we finish, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions the same way, just through this question tab. So thanks for responding, everyone. Look, tonight's session we're going to run through 4 web-based tools, and I'm going to give you some background on those tools and how I use them to assist me to help my clients make decisions. There's insufficient time to thoroughly explore the tools in detail, so consider this merely as an introduction to a number of the tools that I think are available and useful. The MLA Rainfall to Pasture Growth Outlook tool is one that we'll explore. Pastures from Space is another one. The Australian Water Availability Project and Climate is the 4th one. Look, the reason we're doing this is that feed utilisation is the #1 productivity measure differentiating the most profitable producer and the remainder. As feed utilisation increases, the need to act decisively and quickly also increases. So these tools assist in decision making, but they don't necessarily guarantee an outcome. So it's important to put that in context. We're not guaranteeing an outcome, we're assisting in making decisions from these tools. Tonight's webinar is fully funded via the MLA More Beef from Pastures program. The aim of these webinars is just to give you a taste of the type of information that's available. Much of this information is available in more detail in follow-up events, and there's an opportunity at the end of this to provide us with some feedback. So we really need you. I know surveys possibly annoy you, but they're really valuable to both MLA and us because they provide the mechanism for feedback, and it's really important to us. I can't emphasise enough. It'll take you a minute or 2 of your time, so I really encourage you to fill that that survey in at the end. Now, this slide just shows the screenshot of the More Beef from Pastures online manual. The manual consists of 7 modules, and we'll be working largely to the pasture utilisation module. So that's the module that's about increasing green pasture consumed in a sustainable manner using tactical grazing techniques to meet different animal and pasture objectives and at times of the year, and strategic matching and allocation of feed resources to appropriate livestock classes. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to the tools and run through how to use the tools, and I'll talk along the way about some value that I think I extract out of these tools. The first tool is the MLA Rainfall to Pasture Growth Outlook tool. I've got the website opening there, but basically if you Google Rainfall to Pasture Growth Outlook tool, this is what will come up. Now, I've taken screenshots of these rather than showing you live because my internet service isn't that reliable that I can ensure that a live feed will go the right way. So this is just basically the opening page. What it allows you to do is down on the right hand column you can see I've got a number of locations that I look at reasonably regularly, and that goes right through to Wagga. So you can set this up to have any number of weather stations that you regularly look at, and you can put in a postcode and just search on that as well. The next screen, so sorry if I just go back there, you'll notice a number of tabs along the top there. I'm going to talk you through each of these tabs to assist you in understanding what this tool does and how I believe you can extract value out of it. So the first one is the at a glance page. It gives the current situation, outlook data and annual data all with one page. Okay. The next page, I'll just go through each of those individually. So the first one is the at a glance page, is basically provides a summary of the detail to date from the selected start date, current soil moisture index and current pasture growth index relative to all years for which climate records have been selected. So in this case what I'm looking at is the Wagga Wagga Soil Conservice location. The accumulated rainfall to date for the last 9 months is sitting at the 60th percentile. So that means in 40% of years there has been more rainfall than that, and in 60% there has been less rainfall than where that blue line sits at. The next one is the current soil moisture index line, and that current soil moisture index line sits at about 25, the 25th percentile, meaning that in 75% of years there is more soil moisture than what we currently have to this point at Wagga Wagga. And the final one is the current pasture growth index, and it sits at around the 30th percentile, meaning that in 70% of cases we have greater pasture growth than what we currently have. So that's the interpretation of that particular slide. Now this modelling is based on the Webbased model. It bases this on recorded rainfall and other climatic information. It assumes that we're on a sandy loam soil, and that means if you're not on a sandy loam soil, then you can use the indices to change where you think you would be relative to a sandy loam soil. Okay, so the next slide is the annual weekly rainfall pattern. Now what this provides is percentiles in the graph on the top left hand side, and along the bottom is a monthly median rainfall and rainfall reliability table. Okay, so I'm going to run you firstly through the weekly rainfall table, and then a graph rather, annual weekly rainfall pattern graph, and then I'm going to run you through that table. So the green and red lines portray the 90th percentile and the 10th percentile. Okay, now that, I've had something go wrong there, sorry. The 90th and the 10th percentile, whilst the black line represents the median. Okay, now the 90th percentile simply means it's a means of ranking all the data and then looking at those years, or the point at which you will receive more rainfall than that line. So these lines are, I guess, are representing very wet years. The black line is representing the median, or the most, or the year where the point at which you will receive 50%. In 50% of cases, there will be more rainfall than that black line, and in 50% of cases, there will be less rainfall than that line. And the red line, which sits on 0 for most of the year, because this is an individual weekly calibration, basically means that in 9 cases you will get more rainfall than that red line. the table just represents the same thing but expressed in rainfall by month, and the reliability, which is basically the monthly reliability, is an estimate of the reliability of rainfall for each month of the year based on all those records at the site. So that value presented in the table is the number of years in 100 that rainfall for that month has reached or exceeded half of the median. So it's a reliability figure only. The next is the annual soil moisture pattern index. So all these are doing is providing you with what is probable in terms of outcomes, okay? So the same thing here in terms of the soil moisture index, and the index runs from 0 to 1 with a value of 0 indicating that the soil is completely dry, with a value of 1 indicating that the soil is completely saturated. So if we think of those lines in the same way, basically what they're indicating is that we expect in Wagga for the soil to be saturated from week roughly 26 through to roughly week 40, because that's where the black line is at that 1 point. We expect very dry conditions from week 0 to 10 and from week 50 as well. So that's really telling us what to expect. The green line then suggests what happens in the best 10% of years, if you like, and the red line expresses the amount of soil moisture that can be expected by that year in the worst 10% of cases, if you like. Okay, so that's an annual pattern, and finally the final annual pattern is the annual pasture growth index pattern. Now the same thing here, this is an index, so what it indicates is 0 is zero pasture growth, 1 is the best pasture growth that you can expect. So that GROS model is indicating when that pasture growth is either at its maximum, which is 1, or at its minimum, which is 0, or any point in between. So if you have a look at the black line, which is the median, what this indicates is that we can expect that we get the majority of our growth in spring, which is from week 35, we're starting to kick up at Wagga, out to week 45 or so. That's when we get the majority of our growth. We get a bit of a kick in autumn, then we get low growth rates in winter, low growth rates over summer. So that's our annual pasture growth pattern. So that's similar to your annual pasture growth rate curves. Then you see the percentile bands, which indicate very good years, you can expect this sort of pattern, and in very bad years, you can expect the red sort of pattern. Okay, so all those is indicators of what's likely to occur at different locations, and you can do this for your own location using this tool. Someone's asked a question here, sorry, recently. Is the pasture a standardised pasture or a specific type? Winter, rye, phalaris and sub. Thanks for the question. It's a good question. The pasture is actually a C3 pasture, which is I guess either an annual or perennial based on temperate species. So tropical species don't fit into that pasture curve. They're temperate species mainly only. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next graph, which is accumulated rainfall. This is the rainfall to outlook graph. To me, this is valuable because it tells me how the rainfall to date is relative to a historical data set. The 3 dotted lines on the graph, the bottom dotted line here along the bottom indicates the 10th percentile, or the dry years. So this is just rainfall accumulated for either the last 9 months or from January this year. You get 2 options within this tool. what this is telling me is it's not only where this green line ends up that is of value, it's also the shape of the green line. So that shape of the green line is telling me we've had no rainfall because it's absolutely flat. It's telling me we've had no rainfall of any consequence over the period over the last 5 or so weeks at Wagga, and there is a slight kick where we got a few mils here. The other thing that this does is, so the green line represents what's actually the accumulated rainfall to date. So it's not just where the green line ends up, it's the shape of the graph that can tell you something as well. There is other information in this graph which is about projecting outcomes into the future, and that's what these coloured bits are at the end. And these coloured bits, depending on how the colours end up, tells you something about the reliability of the projections into the future. Now what this, the way I interpret this is that there's an 80% chance that rainfall will end up between the top of the grey bar and the bottom of the red bar, based on historical records. Now that doesn't mean it's definitely going to happen, because we know with probability there's still a chance that whilst there's an 80% chance it will be within that band, there's also 20% chance that it will be, or 10% chance it will be below that band, and a 10% chance that it will be above that band as well. Okay, the chosen period will dictate the outcome is the title of this, this slide, and really the key point I just wanted to make here is this is exactly the same slide, but it's either taken from the 1st of January or from the last 9 months. And the key difference here is the last 9 months starts at the 21st of the 1st, and we ended up close to median. That green line is very close to median. Whereas if I took that from the 1st of January, I'm ending up far higher than the median. Why is that? Well, if you have a look at that, how that green line kicks up at the start, it's because we had a high amount of rainfall over the first few weeks of January. So that can skew the whole accumulation of rainfall from that point forward. It's just a note for that interpretation. Look, the next is the soil moisture outlook chart. And I think this is a great chart, because what it's telling me is what are the reserves in the soil, particularly at this time of year, and what's my probability of reaching the amount of feed that I need to get me through with the numbers of livestock that I have on hand. What this graph is telling me is the water available for plant growth stored in the soil at the weather station site at any time during that chosen period. So you can see here at Wagga, the green line is actual, and the black lines, the top one is the 90th percentile, middle median, and the bottom one is the 10th percentile. What that's telling me is we had a wetter period, or the soil was at field capacity earlier than median, because it's hit that top period earlier than where that dotted line, middle dotted line kicks up. But on the downside, we're also hitting we're also depleting soil moisture reserves a lot earlier than what this median line is. And I mean, this is probably just reflecting what is being seen in the field out here, but I think it's nice to be able to look at these tools to support decisions that you may be making tactically. So the thing I take away from that is that if action hasn't been taken now, this is an indicator to say we are not unlikely to get the soil moisture that we do across a greater proportion of years. So we're heading south very quickly, which I interpret through to the next graph, which means that's going to have implications for pasture growth. Now, there is a point that you need to know about this graph, is that again it's about a sandy loam soil. So when soils at that site are not sandy loam, so at your site may not be sandy loam soils, then you may have some some water available when the value is 0, or the soil may not be saturated when the value is 100%. So the index provides a scale. It's not perfect and it's not calibrated to your soils. It's calibrated to sandy loam soils. Okay, so we're on to Pasture Growth Outlook tool, and I find this a really valuable tool. In conjunction with that preceding graph, I think this is telling me a story about where we are up to relative to a known set of historical data. And what it's, again, I think it's mimicking what's happened with that soil moisture graph, which is that soil moisture graph was heading south very quickly. This is mimicking that in a pretty similar fashion. But the thing that I take away from this is if this heads south from this point forward, so if it takes the trajectory of that red line from the black cross point, then we're well short of where the black dotted line sits. What is effectively, if pasture growth takes that trajectory, we've cut ourselves out of a fair bit of spring growth. Now, if we've promoted systems that set ourselves up to use spring growth, then you need to act tactically to manage a lack of spring growth, and that means acting early and acting quickly. The bottom graph is basically the accumulated pasture growth from the 22nd of January of October. So it's telling us something similar to what the accumulated rainfall chart told us, and it doesn't take into account grazing. So if there was no grazing, it's showing an index there that is showing that we're just above median in terms of pasture growth. But if that line flattens out from this point, so takes the trajectory of the red part of that shaded area, then again you can see we're below that median point, which means we've cut ourselves out of growth for the year. Okay, I'm going to get you on to, so that's a very brief outline of the MLA Pasture Growth Outlook tool. I'm going to go on to the Pastures from Space tool. And we will follow up with notes for these, so or a handout, and as well as a recording of the video of the webinar, so you understand. So we'll give you the links to these as well. This is the Pastures from Space site. When you get in here, it gives you this this sort of page. Sorry, I've got a comment. Great tool. I've never been able to get the graphs in such a user-friendly size of view depicted. Would also be good to have the ability to export data presented in the tables. Could that feedback be given to MLA? Yes, I will give that feedback. And actually, what you can do with those charts, sorry, I know I'm digressing back to where we were, but you can actually just left mouse click on those charts or right mouse click on those charts within the MLA tool, and that provides you with an index to copy those charts, and then you can paste them elsewhere. So I find that really valuable to keep the record. Thanks for the question, James. All right, so this is the front page of the tool. Just go into whatever the corresponding thing point that you need, and we're in the east, so we click on the eastern data. Then you've got to register, but this is what comes up after you register. Now, what this main page brings up is a map of Eastern Australia with colours on the map that are corresponding to a scale that in the bottom right-hand corner here, showing the pasture growth rate in kilograms of dry matter per hectare per day for the week that the pasture growth rate image was taken. Now, this is updated, I think it was updated yesterday afternoon. It's updated weekly unless there's cloud cover, in which case it'll still be updated, but the data may not change. The data that is available free, so there's two data sets. There's one that's available free, which is on a shire basis, and that's on 6 hectare grids, or there's one that's available on a paddock-based level, and it's a subscription service that is available to you, and you need to speak to Landgate in Western Australia if you want to go down that path. But I find the free service is great, and haven't had enough exposure to the subscription service, but it may be even better again. Pasture, basically what this uses is so pasture cover or biomass is estimated by measuring the amount of green foliage that appears in satellite images. So basically that information is then combined with meteorological information, local rainfall and temperature, and then it's calculated into per hectare figures on a weekly basis. Now, this may not be perfect for your area because based on those 6 hectare grids and averaged over a district, you may have all improved pastures relative to a district average where that's not the case. I think, if nothing else, it provides a relative scale which is really valuable in my view. Along the right-hand column of down here, there's a range of options that you can press that allow you to look at individual years, individual data points, or historical data. This is really valuable stuff. So I've just pressed on here the Shire pasture growth rates for 14th of October to the 20th of October, and it gives me every Shire in this zone here and the corresponding growth rate with that Shire. And so you can do that for nearly any week of the year. So I find this a really valuable tool. Someone's asked a question, in northern New South Wales, pasture from price growth rate figures for newly sown pasture that's growing like mad is a little different from the paddock next to it that's old and unimproved. How can we take figures seriously when this is the case? Well, again, I think I think that the tool needs to be put in context. It's actually calibrated better for the Mediterranean type pastures and Mediterranean type environments. Does that mean it's useless for perennial pastures? No, in my view, it doesn't mean it's useless. I think we've just got to learn how to use the tool, and the relativity, if nothing else, I think is of value, and I'll talk to that shortly. And look, I've just took last week's graph relative to this week's graph. We were growing at around 60 to 70 kilos per hectare per day, indicated by these sorts of colours, purplish colours. Last week we're growing at 0 to 10 kilos per hectare per day. Well, it's actually 0 kilos per hectare per day this week. So a week makes a big difference when there's no moisture in the soil. The other thing that you can do within this is to compare different locations, and what I've done here is just compared Ararat, Armidale, Dubbo, Roma and Wagga Wagga. And obviously those have different annual patterns of pasture growth, but this provides a comparative rate of pasture growth. And you can see it's been woeful in Ararat, and they've already hit the end of their season when typically they should be growing out for another couple of months. You can see that Wagga's hit the end of its season pretty well. I hope Armidale that trajectory just continues on the upward scale. And you can see, you can compare that with preceding years. Dubbo doesn't look great either. So that's all available in that tool for you to use. I then can, or analysts take this information and do all sorts of other things. What I've done here is looked at Wagga year to date for 2015, which is the middle blue coloured line, and it's saying we're at 5,000 cumulative kilos. Whereas the average from 2005 to 15, remembering it's only a short data set, sits at less. So we've had more growth relative to that short 10-year average, but here, this final orange point tells us how much we expect for the year. I anticipate not much more growth for the year, which means we're sitting at the difference between this orange line and the middle blue line, which means we're down about 1,200 kilos. If you're stocked optimally and you're down 1,200 kilos, you're going to have to think about exit strategies, or you're going to have to think about feeding strategies. That's the key point I wanted to take from that slide. Look, the next slide is the Australian Water Availability Project slide. Look, all I wanted to show you here is this is information that shows the two tables, or the two graphs that I've got there, or picture maps of Australia rather. The top one is upper layer relative soil moisture, which is a percentile rank, and I'll show you on the next slide what the colours mean. And the next one is the lower layer, which is, I watch this one as well, and you can watch this by week, which this is here, just looking at the week ending 18th of October, and I've compared the 2014 and 2013 weeks. What we've got is rainfall with the percent rank running from 0 to 100%, so red's bad if you like, blue's good, and then the same for soil moisture in the upper layer and soil moisture in the lower layer. The aim of this site is really just to monitor the state and trend of the land water balance on Australia, over Australia. So it combines both measurements and modelling. I just find it a good one to, again, to support the decisions that may be made in other areas. Okay, the final one, I'm conscious that we've hit 8 o'clock and I've got about 5 slides to go through. The final tool that I think is of value is this one, which is Climate. This does a lot of the functions that were otherwise available in another tool that was perhaps a little more complex in terms of its user friendliness, for want of a better term, which was Rainman. Now all you do is you can either download this for your iDevice or click the green Start Now. You might have to register, I can't recall. But there's a number of tabs down here. All I'm going to run you through is a few of these tabs. I'm not going to go through all of them, but it's got historical temperature data, a bit of cropping stuff, and then it's got a bit of probability stuff. So all I've done in this is gone to the season's progress, and the season's progress is similar to what was available in the Rainfall to Pasture Growth Outlook tool. So it's cumulative rainfall, but it gives any number of, so you can start in February and go for 3 months, or you can do any combination. You can start in December and go for 1 month, and it can look at, it basically changes this graph to accommodate whatever you put in the order up here. And so you can see the red line just follows the trajectory of the rainfall. This means the flat part of the red line means we didn't get much over that period, but there's that spike that we saw in the preceding graph for Wagga. Each of these blue lines is another year, and when you hit that when you're on the tool, it'll actually tell you which year it is. And this blue line it says it's the average, not the median. So that's the average of all those data sets. The next point I want to make about this is how likely. So all I've put in here is, and I'm thinking about the end of this season, so I'm thinking about decision making at the moment, and what I see here is what is the probability of getting greater than median rainfall from the period from October through to December. And this is suggesting that there's 1 in 10 chance that will occur based on years with similar ENSO patterns. So basically we know that from history and statistics. The forecast probabilities are calculated by looking backwards through history from 1949 in this case, and they compare to sea surface temperatures in the Indian and the Pacific Oceans for that period. Then they're used to look at patterns and relationships to return those probabilities of normal, high, normal and low rainfall events. So you can put in, basically it's saying you've got not a very good chance of getting median rainfall, so that to me says some decisions have to be made now about about the fact that you're going to have less pasture growth in this part of the world. Now that may be different for where you come from, so I understand that things may be completely different. I'm just showing you how to use the tool. The next one is how often, and in here you can put in how often do you receive. In this case, I've looked at rainfall. I've looked at less than 75 mils over the next 70 days, and that's occurring between the 22nd of October and the 31st of December. So what I'm discerning is that we need 75 mils over that period to get pasture and daily pasture growth rates of, say, 10 kilos per hectare per day, in which case this is suggesting that all those blue points are the points at which we had below 75 mils over the 70 days. So 2014, 13 in this case, and then you can see those years that were above. And so you can see in 33% of cases you had less rainfall than 75 mils over that 70 days. I think that's a useful slide. Now I'm conscious that I've gone over time. So look, really all I wanted to do was run you through very briefly those 4 tools. I think the 4 tools are particularly useful in assisting with decisions, particularly where you're getting to a situation where you're running at optimal stocking rates or looking to utilise feed better. So look, I'm going to open it up for questions now, but while I do, I just want to note that the exit survey is really important to us, so that will pop up after this, but I'm willing to take questions now for the next 10 minutes. If you want to leave the webinar, you're quite welcome to. I hope you've extracted some value out of tonight's webinar. I know it's brief and I know it's quick and dirty. Some exposure is useful in my view. If you want more information or there's ways we can help you through more beef from pastures, feel free to contact me. So I'll take questions via the questions tab. Otherwise, there's a question here just saying, I've noticed this session's being recorded. Does that mean Tuesday's cattle set prices session is available? The short answer, Mike, if you're still online, is yes, that is available and it's able to be viewed. So we've already recorded that one. We are recording this one. So if you want to watch the recordings, we're quite happy for you to do so, and we'll send you links to those. I'll just go back because I've sort of talked through some of the questions. Great tool, I've never been. Okay, so I've answered that particular question. There's a question here, John. Oh, okay, so Lee Beckett's asked a question. Of the sites you previewed, which would you use most often? Thanks for that question. Look, the one I use most regularly is the Pastures from Space tool and the Pasture Growth Outlook tool and Soil Moisture tool, because realistically, I guess to put that in context, the most profitable systems are set up to capture or to have optimum stocking rates through spring. So typically that's the period where you have 40 to 50% of your growth. Now the issue there is that if we've got this loading of demand and we don't actually get the growth, then you need to be able to act very quickly. I think those 2 tools are the ones that allow you to act, to make decisions very quickly. And in fact, I mean, I've got clients who use those tools, watch those tools regularly, but they've got to be used in conjunction with feed budgeting and other things. They're really just the taste. They're an indicator, but they're a feeder into other tools to assist making the decision. So I hope that's answered your question, Lee. But realistically, look, I look at them every week. Anytime they're updated, I'm onto them because I want to know what's happening particularly at this time of year, because if we're stocked optimally, you have to make decisions very quickly. Any other questions? I'm hearing silence. Feel free, if you've got questions, to put them in the questions tab, and I will run through them. I'll be here for another few minutes, but look, I'm conscious that We've said that we'd run for half an hour, and we have gone over that time. So if you've got questions, I'll be here for a few more minutes. But if there's silence about this, then we'll end the webinar shortly. So, look, I really appreciate. Here we go. Could we go back to the first slide with the website addresses on it, please? Yes, good idea. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. And if anyone wants to take a screenshot of that, which is a probably the right way to go, then, sorry, I know I'm doing this the slow way. I'm not sure how to do it more quickly. So, in fact, I might try this. End show, and then scroll up here. Here was the one. So if you want to take a screenshot of that, I think you press Control and Print Screen, and that'll just take a screenshot of that for you, and then you'll have those websites available to you in hard copy for use later. So thanks for the point that made that I didn't go straight to it. Now, there may be some registration issues that you've got to go through, but all the data there that's available on those sites is free, and once you become competent at using those sites, I find them really valuable and use them regularly. So thanks for that. Further to that, do you think there's a use for these tools, such as Climate, as a way of sourcing stock? E.g., if producers in southern northwest are looking to destock, but northern New South Wales still looks good from it. Yeah, look, thanks for the question, Ross. I think that has sort of come across my mind that you know, some of the opportunities may align very well with the map, the Pastures from Space map. So you know, I think looking for opportunities in terms of trading livestock opportunities and those sorts of things, I think those tools are a bit of an indicator. Particularly, I mean, we know what happened in Western Victoria. You could nearly this has been read like that for a long time. So I was looking at Western Victoria and parts of Tassie, thinking this isn't looking good for those guys, and that's exactly what happened there. So, you know, I think that's a great point, Ross, and you know, in my view, you know, there's these tools may represent opportunity in terms of trading and that sort of thing. So thanks for the question. Anyone else with questions? I am still open to taking them. The only other point I just wanted to labour, and you may feel that I am labouring it a bit, but that survey at the end is really important to us because it provides us with feedback on how to do this better. It provides us with a mechanism for measuring success of this, and it also provides us with some sort of way of engaging with you in the future if you've said, you know, if you've indicated your needs for future workshops and so on. So look, it looks like there's silence. So look, really appreciate your input tonight. I'm going to leave it there. There are future webinars for next week and ongoing weeks. So please check our website. We'll circulate some more information. I know a lot of you have already registered. I apologise for the registration process being a little bit lengthy between webinars. We couldn't find a way to streamline it. So look, thanks for your input. Any feedback is welcome, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. And Dave's just reminded me, once the session closes, just click on the button that pops up and the survey will launch. So thanks very much for your input tonight, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week or in the coming weeks.